In 1988, DC came out with one of the most offensive comic books in the history of the comic book industry. And in fact, the ending of this is probably gonna leave your jaw on the floor. It's that crazy. So this opens up with what's called The Chosen, basically a group of superheroes who are women and minorities, and that they're supposed to represent a new era of superheroes. And that's not the offensive part. I don't know why anybody would take offense to a minority superhero. But what is offensive here is that they are being chased or being hunted by a guy named Jan Willem Croft. Now, this guy was supposed to be one of the Chosen, but he was ultimately cast out by the Guardians because this guy is basically a white supremacist. Like literally, this guy is meeting with a group in South Africa and they end up showing him just this villain that's been captured. A guy by the name of Hemogoblin, who by all standards of measurement just kind of looks like your normal vampire. And in fact, they push a guy into the room and Hemogoblin immediately sets on him and just starts chewing this guy up, as you would expect a vampire to do. And so what ends up happening is Jan Willem goes in there and starts talking to him. And this guy, it's crazy how racist this guy is. He asks him like, do you know who I am, right? And Hemogoblin's like, yes, I'm aware of who you are. And he says, my friend, we are at war for nothing less than the fate of the world. Through endless hardship, we've carved out the perfect society, but the world that doesn't share it does not understand it. They're too blinded by leftist brotherhood to realize that once the white race is swept into the multitude, the quality of life for everyone goes down the drain. We're the ones who've brought the world as far as it's come, and we must keep control until they see their mistake. Literally, if all the white folks are gone, then the world's gonna go to pot because the world can't survive without white people. So he literally tells them, kill our enemies and become the savior of the world. So he sends this guy out to attack women and minorities. Now, from there, you end up picking up with this guy launching his first attack. The first person he goes after is Jet because she just kind of happened to be there. Now, Jet's able to hold her own to a degree. I mean, she's not really prepared for like the viciousness of Hemogoblin between his speed and the fact that he's just outright brutal. She's not really prepped for it. And so in essence, she's injured, right? And you would think that he's injuring her with vampirism. That's not what's happened. This is why I say, the ending of this is absolutely insane. It's one of the most insane things. Now, because of what's going on with Jet, Gloss steps in. Now, Jet and Gloss share a kind of connection with each other, and so that's why she senses the fact that Jet's being attacked. And then Jet jumps back in, and between Jet and Gloss, they end up forcing Hemogoblin to flee. This guy ends up taking off and running out of building and, jumping out of a window and that kind of thing, and ultimately makes his escape. But the group ends up getting back to their base of operations. And when they do, they end up meeting with Floro and Extraño, of course, Extraño being the gay member of the group, and they reveal that Lily, another member of their group, was also attacked by Hemogoblin. And so because of that, she's just kind of recovering from her injuries as well, but she's showing signs of like succumbing to some kind of an illness. They're not fully sure what it is. And for the most part, they don't really know anything about what's going on. So Floro, who's a character very similar to the Swamp Thing in the sense that he can tap into the green, basically tap into nature, he ends up just kind of using his sources, right, his ability to tap into the green to try to figure out exactly where Hemogoblin is and where he comes from. What they end up doing is listening in on a conversation with these just crazy racist guys down in South Africa, where this guy literally refers to Jet as the Black, right? Like just a Black is what he calls her. Doesn't even use her name or call her like an African or anything. She's just a Black, right? A very antiquated term. And so they ultimately end up realizing it's effectively a hate group led by a guy who was supposed to be a member of the Chosen, who's essentially going after all of them. And so following that, as crazy as this is going to sound, their journey ends up leading them to the Hilton Hotel at the airport. Hardly a just landmark place to have a giant battle with a guy, right? Like a hotel airport. And so once they get in there, they end up coming face to face with Hemogoblin and the fight breaks out yet again. The problem is that while Hemogoblin was able to hold his own against like individual members, he can't really go toe to toe against all the members of the New Guardians working in unison. And so they all just kind of keep him on the ropes, smack him around a little bit, and they all attack him and so on and so forth. He even gets his hands on Extraño for a minute or two, but at the end of the day, he's ultimately subdued and then handed over and presumably, arrested or what have you. But he's essentially subdued. Now the kicker to this is that once the New Guardians leave, because cops come banging on the door, Basically, like, this guy, Hemogoblin, ends up dying in the hotel. And here's where the super offensive part comes in. What ends up happening is a guy, Tom, shows up, who's basically kind of in a romantic relationship and so on, member of the team or what have you, and where they're just kind of like, it's a surprise, right? Like, but you chose too happy of a time for such a long face. And he's like, I was listening to the news. Have you been listening to the news? And they're like, no, like, we haven't really had any time. And he says, it was you who captured that monster at the airport Hilton, right? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, I had to come tell you that guy's dead. He died in captivity. And the response of Floro is like, none of us hit him that hard to kill the guy. And he's like, no, it was his accelerated metabolism. He was already sick. And he tells him Hemogoblin had AIDS. So essentially, Hemogoblin was giving AIDS to members of the New Guardians. I told you it's insane. One of the most offensive comic books ever made in the history of the comic book industry. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. I told you your jaw was gonna hit the floor, man. It's nuts. But I will catch you all later. Peace.